Good morning. Welcome back to our regularly scheduled Mishnah Berurah class. Hope everyone is all excited to learn about coming to shul, and you find that they are the tzibur today. They are reciting the Shema. So that is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to do 65 and probably go into 66 as well. I hope that we can make some inroads into both of them and complete both. But as far as we stand right now, we have 65 to do. So this is Siman Samech Hey, chapter 65 in Orach Chaim. So this one's called Coming into Shul and Finding that the Community is Reciting the Shema, or there is a break in the middle of the recitation of it. Okay, so you start with the Shema. Let's say you read it out of order. So you read it. We talked about this Seir again. Okay, so we talked about last time about reading it out of order. Okay, so we read one out of the order. We read one verse before the other verse, in a different order than they are written in the Torah. So here, you read it without a full flow from beginning to end. So whether the reason why you've stopped it is because it is a long pause, or because you have spoken, and then you return to the place where you had last recited the words of the Shema, and you finish it. Even if you take a long pause, which is long enough to have completed the entire Shema, again, this is with pausing without saying anything, okay? So you still fulfill the obligation, okay? Even if the break was because of something that was beyond your control. That's usually an interesting way to structure that. Even if the pause is something unavoidable, usually we don't structure that way. Usually, so even if that's usually when we would like to do that. So what we're saying is that this doesn't seem to block it. So the Ramah adds a comment on this, and he says, some say, if there was something that was unavoidable, and you take a break long enough to complete the entire thing, you return to the beginning. And he quotes this from a number of different sources, cites it as the common custom. And we measure the length of this pause based on how long that individual would have taken to recite the Shema, and not based on some general idea. And this rule is the same when we talk about pauses in Shemona Esrei. So, let's talk about talking. If the Mishnah Berurah explains the following: let's say you spoke, okay, and you knew what you were doing. You didn't accidentally. Someone walk by and says, they say, good morning, and you go, good morning, good to see you, right? I'm saying the Shema. So, if you did that, even though you have done something that is prohibited, nonetheless, you just pick up where you left and keep going. And that's even if you've made this mistake in the middle of one of the blessings of the Shema. Okay? This rule also applies to Hallel, which is considered one long bracha, like Sukkot Zimra. We talked about that before. This rule also applies to reading the Megillah, and also applies to Birkas Hamazon. Any long bracha that starts with Baruch and ends with Baruch. Okay? And that's when you personally reciting them. If you're hearing from somebody else and you don't hear it, you don't fulfill the obligation because you didn't hear it. Okay? So we're going to continue. We'll come back to these things he says in each one in their proper place. He also has a long statement in the Biur Halacha, which we won't go through today, that by Kriya Shema, it is appropriate to you should go back and start over the spot that you interrupted when you intentionally interrupted your Shema. Because some people hold that way, like Berurah brings down. So he says, so let's just understand, what does this mean? Okay, so the reason for the people who say that when you make a break, or take a break and have a little conversation in there, is that if you were not compelled, you didn't feel that somehow you had to say something, okay? So you knew what was going on, and yet you did it anyway. And in that case, that's where the thing that you say, the speech that you utter, are considered a break and would cause you to go back to the beginning. However, in a case of unavoidable, in a case of something that's an ones, as we would call it, something that is beyond your control, the pause should be considered a break because you cannot say the Shema. So it's entirely possible that this should ruin the continuity of the recitation of the Shema. So the only time when this would be applicable, according to this custom, is if you cannot be speaking at all now. So, for example, you rush to the restroom, and you're not allowed to say blessings or anything of kedusha in a restroom. But for example, if someone comes to you and let's say they found you on the road and they're accosting you, okay, that is not considered a break, even according to this opinion. So this rule is unique to Kriya Shema and its own blessings, but if someone interrupted you in the middle of Shemona Esrei, you have to go back. You have to go back to the beginning. And we'll learn about that in Kuftad later on. Okay, so when we say you have to go back to the beginning, this is what you should do. But really, you shouldn't take any breaks at all, and definitely no break in order to finish the entire Shema, even if it's something that's within your control. Okay, even to take a pause. Okay, so to stop in the middle of the Shema is not permitted. Let's say even if someone wants to talk to you, you cut them off and say, "I'm saying the Shema right now." Okay, and so too if that was also in Shemona Esrei. Yeah, you can't take a break even to listen to what somebody has to say to you. Okay, so another interesting law we learned from over here is that for this reason, since you have to focus on the thing for so long, someone who is reciting blessings for somebody else should not sing the blessings for an extended time period, because the blessings themselves are going to be considered, if you overextend it, considered a break between it and the Shema. And that is maybe a break that could be considered long enough to have completed the whole thing. And you're also waiting for some of the people in the community are not reciting it themselves, but are sitting there quietly listening to you, and you'll lose their attention. And the Mishnah says we should be even more careful about Birchas Kohanim, which is a Torah commandment, that you shouldn't take so long with the reciting of too many long paragraphs when the Kohanim are trying to bless the congregation, because people are going to not pay attention and the break is going to be so long. And so, therefore, he says, I recommend what you should do. You should do the advice given by the Vilna Gaon, from Eliyahu Kramer, the Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna. Then he says that there's 3 paragraphs to recite during the Birchas Kohanim. So one is mandated by the Talmud, and the other one is one that comes later on as a prayer. Because sometimes what happens is that the Kohanim don't do the full, or do an extended version of the Kohanim song. There's a little song they do during Birchas Kohanim to give you time to recite the prayer of the Talmud. So you should therefore not take too long to say even the long one. And if you take too long, that would be long enough to finish the whole thing. And many times even longer than that. Okay. Now, with something else like Kaddish or Kedusha in Shemona Esrei, right? When you're saying the Kedusha, the Nakadesh or the Nakdishach, depending on which minhag you're doing, you could pause in there or put a break in there that doesn't interrupt it with speaking. That could be long enough to complete the whole thing. And the reason why is because you still have the entire Shemona Esrei to rely on. Okay, so let's see. And so we say at the very end of here that you go back to the beginning of the Shema. If you do a full long break, as long as it was long enough to have completed the whole Shema in that break. So let's say it takes you a minute, and you have a quiet pause in there for 1 minute and 1 second, or 1 minute and 2 seconds. You should restart the Shema again. And that's only to go back for Shema. Okay, now that doesn't apply to the blessings of the Shema because they are considered one long bracha. Okay, however, this might be an exception that if you took a break long enough to go for the entire length of that entire section, so from Baruch Hu until Gal Yisrael, basically, if you take a pause like that, that might be considered too long. But if you take a break in between blessings, that would be okay. Because as we learned, you can say the blessings out of order. Okay, let's go on to Siman Beis over here. That took a lot longer than I expected. All right, you recite the Shema. You personally did. Okay? And then you come to shul, for whatever reason. Probably recite the Shema earlier because maybe the shul starts late, and they don't recite the Shema during the time that would be before the time for allotted for saying Shema. They don't recite most of the prayers before Zman Kriya Shema. And now the congregation is reciting the Shema. The Shulchan Aruch says you should recite the line of Shema with them, the first line. You shouldn't look like someone who does not want to accept the Ol Malchus Shemayim, the yoke of heaven, upon yourself with your congregation. And so too, if you were in shul and you're reciting other prayers and supplications on your own, or you're learning something, and you're reciting it in a place where you could take a break, you should recite the Shema with them. But if you are in a place in your reading or your learning where you should not take a break, such as you are reciting Psukei de Zimra, okay, then you should not say the line of Shema, except for that one place in Psukei de Zimra where it has the line of Shema, which is at the end in some editions. But I added that in. He doesn't actually say that. But you shouldn't say the line of Shema. You should recite the words that you are currently reciting in Psukei de Zimra, and then just do the whole. And then just pretend that you're reciting the Shema with them. Okay, so that's what we learned from there. So when you see the congregation reciting the Shema, you should recite it with them, unless it's in a place where you shouldn't be changing the words because you're in the middle of a long blessing, like Psukei de Zimra. Then you should just pretend that you're doing it and recite the words that you're currently saying. All right. So the Mishnah Berurah adds that we said this rule applies when you've recited the Shema. He says, no. Oh, so too, if you have not recited the Shema, you still have to recite the Shema with them. But don't have in mind to fulfill the mitzvahs asayas. And this would be if you found the congregation davening and it was before the time of Shema. But you shouldn't fill mitzvahs because you probably came to shul your tefillin on, and you should have your tefillin on when you recite the Shema. And you also haven't said the brachas of Shema. So we learned earlier Siman Mem Vav, that's the appropriate thing to do. And so too, even if you're in the congregation and it's before you've said the blessing on the Torah, Berurah Torah. So if you haven't said yet, you should say it L'Shem Limud, but not that you should say it like I'm learning it, but nonetheless, only stop to say the first line. Okay, and the Mishnah says not only recite the Shema, but if there's other things that the congregation recites together, you should act like you're reciting it with them. Like, the Hillel Davi, like you say Ashrei, you should say that with them, like it's before Mincha, or recite Aleinu along with them, because it's just an appropriate thing to do. He says it's derech eretz to do that. Okay, and when we said to recite the Shema, we say the Shema and Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Olam Va'ed. But the Gra says that you should recite the whole thing with them. Okay, so he's even more stringent. However, when you're in Psuki Zimra, that you shouldn't recite anything more than the first line, because we'll see in a second that the Shulchan Aruch himself doesn't even want you to do that when you're in the middle of Psuki Zimra. So we said that. So to explain that, we see that the Shulchan Aruch says not to say the Shema when you're in the middle. You should pretend that you're reciting it. But the later authorities have written that when you're in the middle of the Berachos of Kriya Shema, or you're reciting Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach, okay, you should be able to say the first line of Shema. But inside the blessings of Kriya Shema itself, and also in between the paragraphs of the Shema, I guess if you're rushing ahead, that's when you should be just pretending that you're reciting the Shema. Okay. Gimel over here. So you recite the Shema, and you come to Shul, and you find that the tzibur is reciting Shema right now, and you should recite the entire Shema with them, like one who reads Torah. But you only have to recite the first line, which we just mentioned. Okay, that's the end of 65. Let's start with 66. Okay, when can you take a pause, and when will you not take a pause? Okay, so this is a longer section than the last one, but we'll get through it pretty quickly. Okay, so when can you take a break inside of reciting the Shema? So, in between the paragraphs of the Shema, this is a really important section over here. Let's give a little introduction, because this is how we know when you can actually pause to say things like Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, and you can respond to Kaddish, Yehei Shmei Rabam V'Varach, and other such things. Recite Amen to a bracha. Okay, so between the sections of the Shema, its blessings, there's going to be times when you can take a break. So when can you take this break? So if there's an impressive person, an honorable person who basically says hello to you, okay, called Shoel B'Shalom, you can respond to them. Okay, you can if they walk by you can say how are you, and if someone says how are you doing, and the other person, you can respond to them. Okay, so you could. To an honored person, you could go out of your way. To a regular person, you can simply respond. If you're in the middle of the blessings, so you can ask how someone is doing when you are someone from whom you are afraid, okay, such as your father or your Rebbe or someone who is wiser than you, and so too some type of government official or some other person who will give you a hard time. And you can respond to any honorable person, a filu, and that's even if it's in the middle of a verse, except for the verse of Shema Baruch Shem Kvod Malchus Olam Va'ed. Because in those two verses, one should neither take any breaks, nor should they follow any of the other distractions that we're talking about here. That's assuming that they are not going to kill you for not saying something nice to them. Okay? Now, anything that you cannot say it even in Hebrew to somebody. And it's even one word. So that's what we're saying is the restriction over here. So we said between the paragraphs, so this is assuming that you've bumped into each other randomly. Okay? But if someone comes to the door, or they're going to a specific shul together, okay, and you know that that person is going to be there, or you know that your father's going to be there, or your Rebbe's going to be there, you can't put yourself in this situation. This is a case specifically of, oops, I saw my Rebbe, oops, I saw my father, oops, I saw this honorable person. And even then, before a person even starts Baruch Shamar, when it's even before Tefillah together, you have to go out of your way to say hello to them and not make the pause in the middle of the actual bracha itself. So we say that you are allowed to ask them how they're doing. That's even in the regular dialect, and doesn't have to be in Hebrew. I have to say Shalom Aleichem. You can say hello, how are you? And that's only when somebody new that you've seen that you can say, how are you doing? And then you can respond to them as well. For if you don't respond to them, you will increase the amount of hatred in the world. And the Sefer HaChinuch says the following, that someone that you haven't seen in a while, but is still kind of expecting that his friend should acknowledge him, even in that case, you should not take a break, or you should not pause to say hello to them, even in between paragraphs. And basically, on our custom nowadays is that we don't do this, we don't follow this approach anymore, to say hello to somebody in shul during prayer services. It's forbidden to even ask how they're doing, or to respond when they say, how are you doing? And it's even to share Divrei Torah. Okay, basically no talking in shul. If you did it anyway, even in a place where you weren't supposed to make a break, and you didn't take long enough to complete the entire Shema, then you don't have to go back to the beginning. You just pick up where you left off from your bracha that you interrupted. Okay. So let's finish off a couple of other things. All right. So you said we don't do that anymore. So we said your father and your Rebbe. Your Rebbe had to be someone who's just not somebody that you just kind of know, but they taught you for many years, and they taught you most of what you know. Let's see what else you got over here. Okay. Let's move on to the next halacha. Let's say you didn't put tzitzis on this morning, and you didn't put on your tefillin yet. Okay, you can stop in between the paragraphs to put them on and say the blessings on it. Okay, and that's even the blessings of the Shema, but Kol Shekain, you can do it in Pesukei Zimra. Okay, and some people say, the Ramah brings down, that you should not say the blessing on them until after Shemona Esrei, and that is our custom regarding the talis. So what does that mean? So the Mishnah Berurah explains. So if you forgot to put them on, or let's say you left the house and you forgot your talis and your tefillin, so you find them at shul, and you can take a break in between the paragraphs. If you so happen to have a moment in the middle of one of the paragraphs, you still shouldn't put them on until in between them. So that way you can make the blessing. This is according to the Shulchan Aruch's opinion. So this would be a case of where you get the talis and tefillin after Baruch Hu in the middle of the blessings of Shema. But if you get them in the middle of Kriya Shema, you should put them on immediately. because there's a mitzvah to recite those words with tefillin on. Okay. Okay, so tzitzis aren't as big a deal as tefillin, so therefore you can wait to put them on and say the blessing until afterwards. Okay, but tefillin, you should really, really be more careful with it and recite it while you're wearing it during the Shema because of the stringency of reciting unasatam on placing them on yourself ukshatam also, that you are having them on your person while you're reciting these other paragraphs. But putting them on isn't as big a deal. Okay, and that's why we say you should say the blessing on tzitzis afterwards. Now, we just saw that it's entirely possible to put them on in between, but nonetheless, the minhag is different. And so the final halacha should really be like the Ramah, which is not to say the blessings and to wait until after the Shemona Esrei to say the blessings on it. However, if you were in shul and it was embarrassing you to sit without a talis, you could put it on without a blessing, and then recite the blessing on it in between the paragraphs, because that is the essential halacha. So when we say you can make a break to respond to people, you can also take a break to respond to Baruch Hu, Kaddish, and Kedusha. So you can say Yehei Shmei Rabbah, you can say Kadosh, 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 you can say Baruch Hu Etz Hashem Vorach, even in the middle of a verse, even in the middle of Modim. But you shouldn't say, and even to respond to Modim as well, Modim Manach Malach, but you shouldn't only say Modim. Okay. And so therefore, by Baruch Hu, the Ramah adds, you shouldn't say Yisparach. Okay? You should only say Baruch Hu. You should, and Yishtabach. One second. Right, so if you're in the middle of Baruch Hu, you shouldn't respond to the second, and you're responding to the Kaddish, you shouldn't go on and continue with Yisbarach Yishtabach. Okay? This is an old Sephardic congregation, which was not practiced in Ashkenazi congregations, but even if you have that custom, you should be careful not to do that. And how about the Amen? Some people say that the Amen, that you respond after the blessings Hakel HaKadosh, and after Shemea Tefillah. So these are really important, and you can answer them even while they're repeating the Shema Esrei, and you're reciting the Shema. And also, one other place you can take a break is in the middle of any types of blessings, and so do any types of other supplications. Okay. So what we're saying is that you can take a break to say in the middle of Sukkot or other places, Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Olam Mel Maya, and don't say any more after that. Don't say Yisbarach. And then you can answer Amen after that next paragraph finishes. But for Tisra Bal Soson and Oseh Shalom and those other things, the Amens after them, don't say, you can't say Amen after that. And for Kedusha, you can respond Kadosh and Baruch, but those are the main parts of Kedusha, but you don't respond with the third line. Okay? And also, you don't say the verses of the Kadesh. That's all you say are those first two. Okay? And when we say the response to Baruch Hu as Hashem HaVorach. Okay? And then... Okay, and then also, if you heard someone say another bracha, you can answer Amen. So you can only, so people are not sure about it, then therefore, if you're in between sections, you're only in between paragraphs. Okay. And so the reason why this rule works is because, of course, what we said before, that you can respond to actual people. Of course, you can respond to things that have to do with praising Hashem. Okay. Let's see. So when we say that you can respond to modim, you can only say the words modim, anachnu lach, okay, but not all of modim, okay? And even if it's in between the paragraphs, you can say modim, anachnu lach. So how about all the other types of amen? So that every amen that you hear to the end of every time you hear the end of the bracha, you want to respond amen. You can make that that you can say that in the middle of let's say tachanun or anything else, any other thing that you're saying while you're at shul or while you're learning. You know, the point is that he's talking about tachanun. Okay, so you can respond to amen in those type of places, and also during Pesukei Zimra, you can respond amen. But to respond amen in between the blessings of the Shema, we talked about this a little bit. So our custom is to only really respond amen after the first bracha, at the end of the first bracha of Yotzer Or, okay, which is Yotzer Hama Oros. Okay, and that's what we say the appropriate ones. Now, for amen for any other bracha, if you're in the middle of there, you could respond amen as well. But you know, if when we said previously you shouldn't say amen before the blessing of Shema, you shouldn't say that, and especially not to another bracha. So in between Ahava Rabbah and the Shema, you shouldn't answer amen there at all. Now, let's say it so happened that you had to go to the bathroom. You should wait until after Shemona Esrei to recite Asher Yatzar. Here's a couple other cool rules over here. Kohen that was reciting the Shema, and they call him the Aliyah for the Torah. Some people say that he should stop, and some people say that he should not. Okay, and so that's what we say. And that's so too if he was reciting the blessings of the Shema, anything else. So the first opinion is very lenient. However, the halacha is the second one. Okay? So that's what he says. However, the Mishnah brings down that no matter who's getting called to an aliyah, even if they're in the middle of Kriya Shema, even though they could find somebody else to do it, even if it's just a Yisrael, the minhag is that you pause and you go up and recite the blessings on the Torah. Okay? Unless you're reciting the blessing of Shema, and then you say that first. And then you should go up and take your aliyah. Okay, but if you know they're going to call you up later, you should try to finish first. Okay? Okay, halacha 5. I think we'll finish with this one over here. You know what? It's actually a good point. Let's stop here. We'll pick up with this next time, because we'll talk about what are the spots in between. Take a break from. So we will work on this for next time. Thank you very much for attending our class today. We look forward to seeing you when we continue our discussion of taking breaks in the middle of the Shema.